Welcome to the Assistant Lab podcast, hosted by Victoria Racken and Anel Martin.
This podcast is dedicated to the executive assistant profession, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
We've created this podcast for the outliers, the linchpins, the assistants who are serious about their careers. This is a podcast for those who are preparing for the future today.
This is a space for no-nonsense content, benchmarking and tracking industry and world trends, as well as interesting interviews with exceptionally inspirational people. The goal here is to stimulate new ways of thinking and being in this profession.
So, on with the show.
Welcome to this next episode of the Assistant Lab. This week's guest is Dalya Perry-Bernstein, who is EPAA's new chair. Dalya is an award-winning executive assistant. She's got over 15 years experience within the EPAA profession, working in the UK. She has been known for a long time now as EA to Sufyan Ismail, who is a high-profile, high-net-worth entrepreneur. I mean, just a fabulous, fabulous man. He actually came to EPAA's first conference and was on one of our boss panels. Yes, we were running them as far back as 2015, 2016. She has a range of responsibilities managing Sufyan's life and businesses. It's really, really intensive. I don't know how she does it, to be fair. She's a mum of two. She's a professional singer, which you'll hear more about actually as we start the interview with her. She's also a school governor. She's taken part in lots of charity challenges and has successfully climbed Mount Kilimanjaro as well. There are no end to the talents of this woman. To say that I'm honoured that she's agreed to become the chair of EPAA is such an understatement. Dalya has really, really high standards, like Anel and I, for this profession. And we do talk a little bit about the perception and the professionalism of assistants. You're going to get a lot out of this episode, so without further ado, enjoy. Well, good morning and welcome to the Assistant Lab, Dalya, and EPAA's new chair. I'm absolutely thrilled that you've come on with us today. It's been long overdue anyway. Even if you hadn't have become the chair, we were still hoping you'd come on it. But let's just first start by saying congratulations, Dalya,
Thank you
for becoming the chair. It wasn't an easy role to take over, but Katie definitely left the role in good stead, I think, to make that smooth transition. So
absolutely, honestly, it's an absolute honour and privilege. I'm really, really excited, and I will talk a little bit more about that throughout the podcast.
Yeah. Okay, well, I think we get stuck in now. What do you think?
I'm ready. Let's do this.
So we like to take everybody back to their 16-year-old selves, and actually it probably means more in the UK than maybe other countries around the world, because that's a key part in British life on whether you're going to go to college or uni or go straight into the workforce. And so what was happening with you, Dalya, at age 16?
So age 16, Dalya had absolutely no idea what I wanted to do. So my mum said to me, right, you're 16 now, get yourself a part-time job. So I went and got a part-time job in Tesco, where I stayed for 8 years. And honestly, it was the best customer service training I've ever had. It was fantastic for that kind of thing. And obviously made some great friends. At the same time, I went to college. So I come from a musical background, but because my GCSE results were better than had been predicted, I decided not to do the BTEC in Performing Arts that I was going to do, and I went and did psychology A-level and French, I believe. Then I scrapped the French, swapped to English. Then I scrapped the English and swapped to sociology. Honestly, this is how I didn't have a clue what I wanted to do. And I did okay at that, and I had a great time, but ultimately it wasn't what I wanted to do. I wanted to do music. So after I finished those A-levels, I went and did a music A-level. So I played the piano and I played the violin. Violin I started playing when I was 7. So I had to audition to get into the music college, and I was actually really good at the piano at the time. I'm not so good anymore. And I played the most amazing Mozart Fantasia in D that I can't play anymore, but it was so good. And I sang a song by Louise Redknapp. And I got into music college, yeah.
Now I'm a Louise Redknapp. Well, I loved from the girl band
Eternal,
Eternal back then. Who, that was just part of the 90s.
Yeah, it was. But honestly, it was such a nerve-wracking day. But I got into music college and honestly just had the best time. It was fantastic. Met so many brilliant friends. And it was just an all-encompassing music environment. It was just fantastic. I stayed on there, did a HND in music. So I ended up with my cap and gown, and I sang for the first time in public at college, and I was absolutely terrified, but I did it, and I got some really good feedback. So I ended up going out and singing in a duo with another chap from college who played the guitar and sang. Still working in Tesco at the same time, just part-time. And I ended up getting involved in quite a lot of things musically. So I'm going down a completely different path here, but I'll explain it all anyway. I ended up recording an album for the musical Tuppence to Cross the Mersey. So my mum introduced me to a record company in Liverpool called Pulse Records. So she got me that kind of interview. Met the guys, Rob and Alan Fenner, absolutely fantastic. Got on like a house on fire, and we recorded an album with a sofa in front of me and basically a curtain thrown over the top. They didn't have a proper sound kind of studio at the time. Recorded a whole album. And it really took off in the media and all kinds of things. So I'm sat in Tesco scanning newspapers with me on the front. It was completely bizarre. There could have been a lot of opportunities music wise, and I did get a lot of press, a lot of attention, still singing. But then there came a point where I thought, actually, I need a backup plan here. So I think I should get myself a full-time job, and I can still sing at the weekends and do my gigs. But obviously I had no idea really how to use a computer or anything like that. So went back to basics, went to night school and did my it was like an all-encompassing kind of Word, PowerPoint, Excel. Did a course in that, and then I did another advanced course in Excel, and I got my first admin job, which was working for a hearing aid company. Don't say what, we've heard all the jokes before. Yeah, so I went and worked for them. It was actually my brother who got me the job because he was quite high up there. I didn't know how to switch the computer on. I was like trying to fathom a way. That's why I went and did those courses. And then eventually I got a couple of promotions, and I was really enjoying kind of admin roles, and I did more of a kind of coordinator role. I was working loads with Excel. Then I went and got another job working for a firm of surveyors, which funnily enough was in the building that I work in now. And the lady that I work with now interviewed me for that job. So we've kind of gone full circle. Yeah.
Unreal.
I know, it's funny how life turns out. But yeah, I went to work there. And it was there that I kind of came into my own, really. I went to night school again and did an ILM certificate in first line management. I started getting involved with lots of meetings and just trying to push myself out of the admin role that I was doing and getting more involved in other things just off my own back. And my boss, she saw something in that, which was great. The PA at the time in that company was, I would say I was a little bit intimidated by her. She was quite loud, not in a bad way, just I didn't really kind of collaborate with her that much. I was a little bit nervous maybe. But she ended up leaving, and the director at the time and my boss approached me and said, we'd really like you to apply for this role, which I couldn't believe, to be honest. But of course I went for it. And I got it, and then the feedback that I got from that role was really, really positive. And my director actually said at one point, you're the best PA that I've ever had. I thought, how can that be? Because I've never done this role before. So I thought, well, maybe this is my kind of calling then. Absolutely loved the job. There was a hard time during the period that I worked there. There was redundancies made. My director left. We went into a new division, which is more a kind of energy division. I had a new boss, and he became my real mentor at that time. So he would take me out with him to meetings. He would text me all the time. He would get me to make notes. He would ask me questions after the meeting, and it really got me to get super switched on, think about things. notice things. So he was, I would say, my first real mentor. Time went on and I ended up leaving that role. I went to work in Liverpool for a design agency as a PA, and it was just, you know, I never have regrets. I don't, but it probably wasn't the best thing to do because the recession just hit. I just bought my first house. The recession hit. 6 weeks after I got the job, I got made redundant, and I was literally, well, I had nothing. Thank goodness my parents were very generous and helped me out. And then, so I was just job hunting then, and my fairy godmother, as I call her, Amy Shilcock from Hayes, contacted me and said, there's a travelling PA job for a company in Bolton, which, you know, is about an hour's drive away from me, but I was really interested in that role. So I went for the interview and went for a second interview, and then the next day I got the job and I was out on the road with my new boss, Sufyan Ismail, and we were out with his chauffeur, me, him in the car, off on the road, and the rest is history.
Fantastic.
And Sufyan is amazing, Anel. I don't think you weren't he spoke at our first ever EPAA conference, and we'll come to that, but you weren't at that.
Not familiar. No, not familiar with them. Very interested to find out more. Dalya, just coming back, I don't know if you've also noticed this, but a lot of assistants that I come in contact with started off in creative spheres.
Oh, absolutely. I was thinking the very same thing. You know, Katie is very musical. There's so many PAs that are very, very creative and don't come from necessarily that background and go and do kind of business administration or anything like that. And, you know, yeah, I got a cap and gown, but it wasn't in this field, which is why I'm quite passionate about the fact that not everybody, in my opinion, needs to have a degree to do this role.
Absolutely. You know, I always say to people, when confronted with a choice, yes, a degree is fantastic. Yes, experience is fantastic. And in an ideal world, I will always recruit for both, if possible. But if I can't have both, I'm always going to go for experience, or I'm going to go for that something, that X factor. I always say to people, when you are working with an assistant, it is a very close relationship. You spend more time awake with your boss than you do with your husband or with your significant other. So the communication, you really got to, the personalities, the communication style, all of that has to be in place. The rest can be developed. But if you don't click, you know, and I think that is something you make a very, very good point there, that it is an important thing. You have the degree, but a relevant degree, there are still transferable skills. You know, it doesn't matter what you've qualified in or what you've worked in. As long as you have a growth mindset, everything you've learned up to that point is transferable into the profession. That's my take.
Absolutely. And I'm sure in an interview, you know, there wasn't many questions, I would say, about educational background. It is so much more about personality. Are you going to get on with that person? Do your values align? Because you do spend so much time with them, especially in a role like traveling PA. You know, it was 4 days a week away, in the same car, working together. So you have to be able to get on. So important.
Do you know, it's another irony is how many Brits we've interviewed on these podcasts that have worked at Tesco's, Sainsbury's, Asda, Morrison's. Kind of, you haven't lived life until you've worked at a UK supermarket.
It's absolutely a rite of passage.
Absolutely.
So that's really interesting. But I was sitting there thinking about, because obviously Anel's talked about the theatrical background and what she did in past podcast interviews, and when you were talking about that, which I've known you a long time and I never knew that. I didn't know you had an album put together, but that doesn't surprise me. But do you get wistful sometimes, and especially like watching any of these sort of reality programs?
Well, I mean, I got asked to audition for Stars in Their Eyes. So I went for that audition, and I'll never forget it because I turned up at Granada Studios on my own. I was queuing up outside. Well, actually, I wasn't even queuing because it wasn't that type of competition. You got invited to the audition, and something blew in my eye, and I had to go and see the on-site nurse before my audition. Have my eyelid flipped inside out. My eye makeup was everywhere.
Oh no!
I thought, you know, I should have gone and done Gabrielle and put a patch on and done that, but. But no, I had to do. They tell you what they want you to audition for as well. So So I got Nelly Furtado and The Cause.
I love both of them. Oh wow. Well, I'd love to say that I've got a talent like that, but I can't sing.
Well, I must tell you,
great food. But
yeah, absolutely. I've been blessed with a plate of food out of Vic's kitchen. She really is a champ. The only thing I ever got asked to audition for after college was The Weakest Link. I was considered too young at that point, but you can see why. You are the weakest link.
Oh, I do love, this is why I love doing this podcast though, because I love hearing people's backgrounds, and it, as I keep saying, it's not linear, it's so different from everybody, like how you find your way into this profession, and it's not a one size fits all, and I think that's what's great. And especially if there's any sort of parents out there listening thinking, well, my kids don't really know what they want to do yet, it gives a bit, like, I think it gives some reassurance to them. Okay, well, if my son or daughter goes in to do this course, then they could end up doing something completely different, but it's going to be fine, it'll be okay.
How do you know at 16 what you want to do, really? I mean, I think if I had the mindset I've got now, I probably would have chosen something like psychology or law or criminal psychology, something like that, but I never would have had all of those experiences that I've had. And
the adventures.
Yeah, and I was terrified to get up on stage and sing. I'm absolutely petrified, but I do like things that take me out of my comfort zone. And because of the singing on stage, and my mum and dad, bless them, they came to every single gig, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and worked full time. And they said, when you first got up on stage, you wouldn't move. All I could see move was your big toe, and that was it, and obviously your mouth. But I was terrified, but eventually I've come out my comfort zone. I've ended up now I sing on my own, and I still sing now, and I'm fine, I'm confident, but it's helped me along the way for things like, the public speaking. I really enjoy doing that now, and so it's helpful, and so it's been really helpful.
But have you found that also when you go into an interview process, having that background of going to auditions kind of sets you up for success for any interview, because you walk in and it's like a casting. You realize they're looking for something very specific. So even if you don't get the spot, you kind of have built up a muscle that can deal with that, and you don't take it personally. That was one of the big takeaways for me, was not just the confidence to speak in front of people, to be able to express yourself, but being able to go into those high pressure situations and realize this is not about me. They're looking for something specific. To me, that was super helpful.
Yeah, and I really enjoy those situations now, because I do like a bit of a challenge secretly. So, and it's helped me to be able to read a room very quickly, who's in the room, who's looks like maybe a bit of a threat, because some of these places that I've sang in, they've been the roughest places in Liverpool, and I've had to deal with all kinds of people. And it's just about how to deal with all those different personalities, and definitely stand you in good stead for so many situations.
And so let's get on to Sufyan, because that guy is an entrepreneur in the true sense of the word. He's got so much going on, and in turn you have, and I mean, he's such a fascinating guy, like seriously. He came to the first EPAA conference, and he was on a panel of execs that we had to really give the kind of boss viewpoint. And he was all about the tough love there, which personally I love that kind of thing. But a couple of the PAs were like, oh, but he was like, nope, this is how you deal with bad bosses. Like, and that's what I love about him. Like, I've always loved that about him. But tell us a bit more about his world. And
yeah, I will do. So as I say, I've worked for Sufyan for 13 years, maybe 13 years in June. And Sufyan is a true entrepreneur and philanthropist. And I think what you'd say is that not all entrepreneurs are purely motivated by money. It's what money can do. And that's why he's decided to retire at 38, which is very, very fortunate, and designated almost all of his time and effort into more charitable endeavours, both in the UK and abroad. So he's helped to build hospitals, he's helped the sick, and spending a lot of his time and effort trying to eradicate racism, particularly Islamophobia, which I talked about with you before, Vic. So ultimately it's about what makes him happy. And for him, it was more about ensuring the world becomes a better place with with less prejudice and better to retire when you are fortunate enough to do so than to, and to try and make a difference. And obviously he has got other businesses going on. He's more of an angel investor now, I would say. And I've just been involved in every single thing that he's been involved in. I've been fortunate enough to be involved in as well. And because of his charitable endeavours, it's why he's been named amongst the 500 most influential Muslims in the world 5 times.
Amazing.
And to give you some context, there's roughly 1.9 billion Muslims in the world. So I'm fortunate to work alongside him, and I'm absolutely grateful for that. And so he's built up MEND, which is Muslim Engagement and Development, from a grassroots level, which is now the biggest organisation in Europe tackling Islamophobia. And MEND has become a Muslim household name in the UK. So they're now rolling out their endeavours in different countries as well. He's involved in the Islamophobia Response Unit, which is purely a unit to assist with and provide legal help to victims of hate crime. And they've assisted cases, 1,200 cases now to date, including attempted murder, which is very sad, but amazing to be involved in it all.
And I think something that struck me by what you've just been saying is that point where you decide, I want to leave a legacy instead of, hoarding mountains of cash. Money's great, but I think for entrepreneurs and people who really think in that way, the legacy is more important. So, I had goosebumps while you were talking about him. I mean, that is absolutely incredible and must be inspiring to be so close to watch somebody and their thought process and how they engage with people must have been absolutely incredible.
It is incredible, and talk about learning, there's so much that I've learned from him. And I am in a very, very fortunate position because so many people want to speak to him, want them to speak to people, want to learn from him, and I get to grasp.
You've got a front row seat.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think find with entrepreneurs these days, and feel free to disagree with me because this is just my viewpoint, it's like a tale of two halves. So you've got people like Sufyan who are like, I want to better the world, it's not all about the money. But then you've got the other half where it is about the money, and their measure of success is waving around Chanel handbags, and it's all their pictures are for the gram, and they're sitting on private yachts. And that's fine, because I know some people do aspire to that, and that's how they measure their success, by the biggest house, the best car, the best holidays. But I don't know, like everything that's happened with the lockdowns and the cost of living and the high inflation and the homelessness just in the UK alone, let alone the rest of the world, it just doesn't really, those sorts of entrepreneurs who are on that side of it, what I call it all for the gram side, it just doesn't sit with me anymore.
And that's why I would say choose your boss very carefully. You're going to be working very closely with them, and if there's something that you don't quite like, it won't sit right with you, and you just won't be able to get past that. So they have to align with your values and morals and the way you think. Otherwise, it's not going to gel.
And that is such an important point that you make. If there's a conflict in value, if there's a conflict in what I truly believe as a human being, I have been in those situations and had the confidence to step out and say, this I can't do. I can't get into bed at night and be okay with myself by being this close to this specific issue. I think that is a very important thing. Sometimes, people think it's about that image, it's about that role, and like you said, for the gram, I'm working for this high fly. But sometimes you've got to think what you sacrifice on a personal level, your own values. I couldn't do that. So I think you make a very, very good point there, that alignment has to be there, because it will chip away at who you are if you stay in that situation.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so let's talk about corporate PA life versus startup entrepreneur life. And I know I've touched upon this with a few of our guests. And I think there's a couple of reasons for this. I've constantly harped on about the fact that the most assistant roles over the next decade will end up being in SMEs, where predominantly in the past, most assistant roles, not sure for SA, you can chip in on that in a sec, but certainly when I came into the industry all those years ago, no, hardly look old enough, but everything was about corporate. That was the measure of success when I was 16, 17, 18. Like every assistant was trying to get into a global bank or, you know, a big FTSE company. And obviously a lot of those assistant roles have gone now. Since 2008, they've slowly gone. There's been restructure after restructure after restructure. And there are still lots of corporate assistants about, of course. There are not as many, and the shape and way of doing business is changing. And a number of corporate assistants have tried to make that leap into working for an entrepreneur, smaller businesses, and it's been quite difficult for them to do that because they've gone from structure and process to this is mess. We don't have people to do this. There isn't an office cleaner, and we all muck in and have to get involved with stuff. And some make the transition, they do it really well, but a lot of assistants from the corporate world are wanting to do that, but they've struggled with it. And so it would be good to kind of get that bird's eye view from you on working in a smaller business and getting more involved.
Yeah, well, what I would say is it's extremely fast-paced. You're working on a real-time basis, so be prepared for that. The barrage of emails, messages, WhatsApp messages, that is just how the entrepreneur's mind works. And I'm fine with that because, you know, if I think of something, I send myself an email or write myself, you know, so if I was the entrepreneur, I would be probably exactly the same because I just need to offload. So I would say it's probably more demanding in that sense, because the entrepreneur will have thoughts and ideas to offload at any time of the night or day. You know, some people don't like having emails after 5:30 because it intrudes in their time. You just have to forget that, I'm afraid. The email comes in. You don't have to deal with it right away, of course. You might want
but it will
to,
come in.
you might have the ideas too. So, you know, there'll be an awful lot to learn. So I would say, try not to immediately think that you won't be able to do something. Just try and take a step back, think about it, and then have a go at it. Don't shy away from new topics and new things. You won't necessarily be able to stick to your job spec. So be mindful of that. I mean, I don't know how many times my job spec might have changed, but you know, from 1 minute we were organising events in the Ritz in London, and the next minute we'll be sat in a community centre in Tooting having samosas and talking about completely different subjects. And you've just got to be very kind of transitional in that sense. You will learn a lot. So take on every single project that you are given and embrace it. And they won't necessarily be in the realms of your normal kind of EA path. It might be a completely separate project that you think, oh, hang on a minute, this isn't quite in my job spec. Just go and have a go, because the things that you can learn and then you can add to your CV is incredible. And especially if you're wanting to take a step onto a completely different subject, like being a project manager or, you know, social media manager, HR, things like that. There won't be many meetings about a meeting. It will just be a discussion and then it'll happen, which I'm quite happy about that.
Yeah.
Because I'm quite an impatient person generally, so that's great with me. Yeah, embrace change, don't get frustrated. And if you make a mistake, because it will happen, I've made plenty. I think it's not about the mistake that you've made, it's how you rectify it and how you deal with it, because they won't want kind of you to dwell on it forever. There's just not enough hours in the day for that kind of thing. So deal with it, apologize, don't do it again, move on and learn from it. That's the biggest lesson that I would say. And I said it before, but ensure that your values and morals align with that person that you're going to be working with, or the company ethos or the brand values, and just be mindful that you are an extension of that person. So you talked about it before, Anel, about being a brand ambassador. Always be mindful of that. The way that you draft your emails and send them, it's always on behalf of the other person. Even if it's yourself, they'll relate you back to that person. WhatsApp messages, things like that, how you promote yourself on social media. Always be very mindful that you have a close relationship with this other person, and anything that you do really can reflect back on them. You're very mindful of that.
It's a co-branding. I mean,
Yeah.
you are a package deal, and like you said, it's such a juicy story. It's never, it's not Vic was rude to us. It was the CEO's PA was rude to us.
Yeah.
That's a much juicier story. So we've got to be cognizant of the fact that that is a co-brand, and you've described it so well.
And also, that you'll find that they have your back as well. So because you're so well connected with that person, anybody says anything that's slightly derogatory towards you, they'll have your back too. So it's a two-way relationship, which is for me great for me. And in my environment, it's a very, very small kind of office environment now, family office environment. So it won't always be the same for everybody, but you will get those similarities when you're working for an entrepreneur or a small startup. It's very different to the corporate world. You are the departments. You don't have the departments to go to. I think Lee talked about this.
You are it.
Your HR, your payroll, you pay the invoices, you do the recruitment, all that kind of stuff is down to you. But it's
also quite empowering. It is really for those people who say, oh my goodness, I'm so bored, I've plateaued. You will very seldom have those conversations with somebody who's working in a smaller company or working for an entrepreneur, because things are always changing. You've got to be able to be very resilient. You've got to be any kind of chaos and change, you've got to be able to take in your stride. I don't know if it's the same for you, Dalya, but they often look to you to be the stability. You are the source of zen in that office. They will come to you for the solutions and for that grounding. I don't know if you experience that as well.
Maybe not so much with Sufyan, because he is I've never known him to ever get stressed about anything. He's just not that type of person. But at the same time, you do get asked for your opinion on things, and they will often go with that opinion, which is that's really it's empowering, like you say.
It's a shame in a way. I mean, the transition to more assistant roles, being in SMEs in particular, I gave some of the stats and facts on that fireside chat we did yesterday on the amount of small businesses that have been registered with Companies House just during the pandemic and since. It's a shame so many assistants are quite fearful of it at the moment, because it does, but you have to be honest about it. I mean, Dalya and I were talking earlier, like I've said to the EPAA board, they all come from different backgrounds. So we have a brand new board of directors, and we've got a WhatsApp group. And, when we were interviewing these board members, we said it will come in peaks and troughs with EPAA. Like there'll be a massive messages, and then it will rain back, and you might not hear anything for a little while and be thinking, is she all right? But I'm not a corporate PA anymore. I'm a business owner who's trying to lead a business off the back of a pandemic, and now in a cost of living crisis. So when I get ideas, that might be 2 o'clock in the morning. And that's when I have to get it out. But like you were saying, Dalya, you don't have to do something about it then. So I just say that I said to the board again recently, like, nothing's urgent unless I actually tag you in the WhatsApp message. That's why I did feel a bit sorry for Meghan Markle, all the accusations. She was WhatsApping palace staff at 5 a.m, but she comes from a completely different background. That might have just been her getting out her ideas then at that time, because she's awake at that time.
And I think that this also comes back to, we need to set boundaries. If you are not willing, if it really is a non-negotiable for you, put your phone on silent and have the discipline not to check it after hours. Because I'm working with a lot of social media clients who are small business owners. So they will send me things at odd hours, but they know our arrangement is brain dump all you want. I will get to it, please, just flag me if it's really urgent. But for the rest, use that as a space to put ideas down, because for us, it's useful for both of us. But have your own boundary if it's a non-negotiable for you. And I think often people with children, people who are caring for an elderly parent need those boundaries. So, also then claim that boundary for yourself if it's something that's really an issue for you.
Yeah, and I think that should be discussed probably at interview stages, that I'll work these hours, I'm contactable these hours, but between this and this hour, that's my time. You know,
Please help me.
that's
Yes.
really important to you, then it should be discussed and it should be noted at interview stage.
But also, I think if you're working in an entrepreneurial space, a smaller company, if there really is drama, I don't mind taking that call or attending to that issue when it comes in, but it shouldn't become a pattern and a lifestyle. You know, if it really is, you know, sometimes it can degenerate into that, but I think, again, it's about your boundaries then. You touched on something interesting. You talked about you've got to be aware about your social media presence, how you show up in the world, because you are associated with somebody who of profile. So just tying back onto that, you know, our profession tends to, we often have the discussion about all the unicorns, the fairies, and the fluffy bits. You know, I think we don't do ourselves any favors by positioning ourselves as professionals. What is your take on that? Is that purely something that I'm experiencing in my own bubble, or are you experiencing that from your side?
Yeah, we're definitely experiencing it, and I'm so done with it. We've had this discussion before. It's, you know, we're not going to be taken seriously if we keep having these images of PAs with capes and Mary Poppins flying in to save the day. And you know what? This is just not good for our profession and respective of our roles. Like, you know, Lee Felton, if anybody has a chance to listen to that discussion that Vic had with her yesterday, please do, because she's so passionate about this and about empowering our roles. And honestly, all the nonsense just needs to go, because otherwise we will never be taken seriously in our profession.
You know, you never see images of a rock star pilot, a rock star surgeon. You know, to me, some of that stuff is just so bonkers. So, you know,
I just kind of beggars belief for me sometimes. Now, I'm going to revert back to, and this is an organisation that Dalya and I used to be a member of, the EPAA, which is our predecessor. And EPAA was the Association of Personal Assistants, and it was run by Dr. Gareth Osborne, who I actually knew before he set that up, because he headed up the REC, and my boss then knew his boss. So all this background. But one of the things, I used to have quite a few hot-headed debates with Gareth, but one of the things he said, and actually a lot of the stuff he was saying back then is actually, yeah, I would agree. If we were sat in a room now, I'd actually be saying, I'm so sorry, Gareth, you were actually right. One of the things he said to me in, I think it was around 2010-11, was, Vic, this profession is its own worst enemy at times. Like, look at what you people have put, how you're, you know, masterminding your own perception. And he was talking about the gimmick stuff. He said, look, put yourself in my shoes, you know, as an ex-corporate director, CEO of the REC, you know, before I started APA, seeing what I see of this profession. And I was like, but no, we're undermined, undervalued. And I went on a real set to with him. But he's actually right, because when I open up my LinkedIn feed, I'm seeing crowns and tiaras. I was complaining actually just last month about that there was a whole massive debate which top flight assistants were getting involved in, discussing whether how much we make refreshments and get lunch for our bosses. I don't care. That's not the topic of the day. No. It's embarrassing that we are discussing things trivial like that, which should be for a closed Facebook group or a closed WhatsApp group. Seeing that on LinkedIn when business leaders are going through what they're going through, and we're talking about whether we're prepared to fetch them coffee or get them lunch. I just, it beggars belief to me. I was so embarrassed. I stayed well away from that conversation. But it just gives you a metric of how far we've got to go as a profession.
Yeah. And, you know, I really liked Gareth, and I completed my diploma in personal assistance with APA, and it was a fantastic course, and I mean, it was great. But no, you're absolutely right in what you're saying, and so what if your boss asks you to make lunch or get a tea? If I'm asked to do that, I'll just do it. I'm not going to say no. I'm just going to do it because it needs to be done, and I don't need to really discuss it.
And not just that. If that's what they need, I'm here to make sure you are at your peak. Okay. So whether it's a cup of tea after a stressful meeting, whether it's helping your child out with research for a school project so that you can get on with something else,
Yeah.
I don't care. But it comes from a place of confidence. The people who are complaining about this feel that it's beneath them.
Yeah.
I've never had that moment. I've always thought of it in terms of, if that's what you need, I will do it for you with love from my heart. It takes nothing away from me.
Yeah.
And I think it comes from a very kind of insecure place that this is a discussion.
I feel like I'm in an ulterior on another planet sometimes in comparison to some of the debates I see about this role on LinkedIn. And I'm just being open because we always said we would be on this show. But then I look at what business leaders are having to contend with around the world right now. What are their top priorities? And we're having a massive sing-song debate, which is actually clickbait. It was clickbait to get assistants riled up. The fact they fell for it is quite worrying.
Yeah.
But honestly, that sort of discussion about what you're prepared to do in terms of personal work, fetching teas and coffees, do that interview. Like, don't embarrass this profession doing that when the HR profession and lawyers and directors are talking about innovation and growth and EDI and sustainability, and we're
talking about team.
I'm embarrassed. I'm literally embarrassed.
Yeah, the other thing to say about that is being a brand ambassador. If you do jump on the bandwagon of those type of conversations and start saying, well, I know it's disgusting, I get asked to do X, Y, Z, you know, what kind of recruiter is going to look at those comments and think,
oh, I want you.
You know, I'm not someone who has to have my ego massaged every hour of the day. I just get on with it and do the job, and that's the end of it.
Well, it kind of gets into a bit of this victim place, which I've spoken to some other trainers around the world about. We've been having these conversations about how have we ended up such a victim profession. You could probably do a whole podcast just on that. And, you know, listen, we're not in the space that we want to be. We don't get that level of respect. We know that. But the way to go about it is not what's being done at the moment. And it does feel like there is starting to be a massive pushback against this. Like, I've never put a tiara or crown on my head and say crowning it like a boss. And I just, it doesn't resonate with me. And I don't think it does with a lot of real career assistants. I think I purposely, as no one knows, I purposely stayed off LinkedIn quite a bit because there was so much of this stuff during the lockdowns, and I didn't want to upset people because I knew people were mentally fragile because of the lockdowns and, you know, everything that was going on. But seriously, these are not economically strong times at the moment for many countries around the world. If you know, if we want to be taken serious, I'm afraid we are going to have to start pushing back on this now and having these what are difficult conversations.
And Vic, you know, just coming back to what you were saying, we haven't even addressed the elephant in the room. If we have all the pink tiaras and the glitter and the unicorns, how can we position this as a true profession and something that's inclusive of men? You know?
But disappointing it, and we have had this discussion. So our new boarders met for the first time, and we have had this discussion at the first board. And I said, even more worryingly, a tiny minority of man assistants have been pushing this on LinkedIn as well. I've got screenshots of it, and it's just, it's not like I'm sending them anywhere. It's just that I'm trying to digress what's happening with our industry and profession at the moment. And of course, you're not favorite flavor of the month if you're saying the difficult stuff that needs to be said.
The tough love.
Yeah, and it is the tough love. Yeah.
You know, so if we look at going forward, you know, you mentioned, you know, all the new developments at EPAA. What's the plan? What are you excited about? You know, I know it's still very early days from the appointment, but what's going on behind the scenes?
Well, I think EPAA now is at a really exciting point because we kind of stripped right back and we almost started again. So we've got a brand new board, and we want EPAA to really get the profession the respect that it deserves, and really empower the role of the PA and the strategic EA. You know, EPAA did some fantastic things before COVID, like the Not Just a Girl's Job campaign. There were so many exciting things in the pipeline, but obviously, unfortunately, COVID hit, and you know, it did set things back. But we're back now, and we're still standing. And we're going to play that song at some point at one of our conferences.
I love that.
Might even sing it.
We'll hold her to that. We will hold her to that.
I would love to be a fly on the wall. That sounds like something that needs to happen.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
and you know, I think there was a lot of buzz and energy with the new board. Everybody's quite clear about what they do and don't like about the industry. And it was a good time to reflect on as well, because it was really, and I have lightly touched upon it. But, you know, we look back and say that we didn't deliver what we wanted to, but we did deliver a lot of other stuff. And unfortunately, you know, we gave away all these free memberships, and I am going to talk about this publicly now. You know, I've got a whole folder of abuse I had sent to me from assistants during that pandemic who were on free memberships, who'd been given free coaching, free training, and you know, I was giving more and more and more, and they just kept complaining and complaining and complaining. And actually, to the point where I had to consult with a lawyer a couple of months ago about some of them. Because it just kind of got to the point that we've tried to do our best. We're an association, not for profit, you know, that has predominantly mostly been funded personally by me and my husband over the last few years to help the profession out during really, really difficult times. And I think when I've done that reflection piece with the board, it is like, I'm all about reflection and the lessons learned, and actually the sorts of EAs we really want to help going forward, those real career EAs you know, that need help with the confidence, that want to stretch, that are tired of being put down by colleagues because of the job title they've got. I cannot afford to waste more time on assistants who are just sitting there complaining about their lot in life, which fortunately only makes up a minority. But I am bringing this up now, and I haven't before. I've done it a bit in the Facebook group, but I'm going to keep that folder of abuse, the screenshots of the messages I've got and the emails, and to remind me what we set out to do for EPAA. And one of the things, when Dalya became chair, I said, I feel like we need to take it right back to the beginning, like we'll almost start up again, because we've had so much going on as an association since we started. And, you know, now we're in, as she said, a really exciting space. You should see our Trello account.
Reset.
Seriously.
It's busy.
But also, I think, you know, Vic, that's a brilliant place to be, and to say, I want the serious, professional-minded, the focused, those who are moving forward into the future in a constructive way. Not, you know, I often say to my clients, not everyone's your client. Not everyone is going to, and by trying to be too generic, by trying to take everybody with you, you leave behind the people who should be with you. So I think having that strong reset, that strong focus on this is the target market, this is what the ideal member looks like, and this is the value we want to give them. I think it's such a great way to go about it.
It's been like a weight off my shoulders. Like lockdown, I think the pandemic was just like a huge burden for everybody, like mentally, physically, everything. And what, you know, what we've achieved already as a new board in the last couple of months has been like
amazing.
It's really exciting. And, you know, we want EPAA to be the association that people who are absolutely dedicated and professionals in this industry to be members of, because we are cutting out all the unicorns, fairy dust, and we're talking about, you know, our careers. And we're going to be delving into all kinds of different things like technology space, ChatGPT, things like that. Diversity and inclusion is going to be a massive part of our work. Trying to get more of the younger generation involved and interested in the role, to support the longevity of the profession. All kinds of things. And I just think our board now is so talented and collaborative. I'm really excited about what EPAA will have to offer in the next years and beyond.
Well, I'll be watching this space with great interest. Listen, so we always, to end off our podcasts, ask about the big lessons learned, you know, the things you wish you had done differently, or, you know, those milestones, those little waypoints where you think, you know, this was a huge lesson for me. Is there something that sticks out to you on your career journey thus far?
I mean, nothing that I would say I regret, because, you know, I listen to quite a lot of podcasts, and I listened to one the other day, and there was a chat talking, and he said, you know, don't have regrets in your life, because what are you going to do about it? That happened and it's gone, and it's such a waste of time and energy to start dwelling on it, and just move on. So I try not to have any regrets, and actually I don't, because I've really enjoyed everything that I've done. And yeah, I've made mistakes, but I've learned from them as well. So there isn't actually anything really in particular that sticks out to me.
So if you had to share one lesson, one thing that you wish you could tell that 16-year-old self, is there something that comes up for you?
I would say, don't be so underconfident at your abilities. And that is what I would teach my kids, is that, because it's a thing, it's being shy, it's not knowing your own talent, that imposter syndrome. I still get it now, but talk yourself around, try not to dwell on mistakes that you've made. Like I say, there isn't probably one thing that sticks out, but
that's a huge nugget. And I always say to people, if I could fix one thing for the profession, I would sprinkle magic pixie dust on everybody, and they'd all be 15 to 20% more confident. And with that confidence, we'll fix all the other problems. So I totally agree with that. That is absolutely a brilliant final thought to leave us on.
It's been a fantastic hour, as I knew it would.
It just flew by.
yeah.
we could have talked all day, but perhaps we will in the future get do an EPAA board podcast and get more of the group on down the line when we've started achieving some of these massive projects we've set ourselves. But it's really exciting times for the profession, as always. Dalya, you've been a huge inspiration. Of course, we met back in 2011. I've known you for a long time now. And now here you are at the chair of the national body in the UK. And I can't wait to see what's going to happen with your career further, because you have been a huge inspiration to assistants over the years, and given up your time to speak and mentor and coach, and long may that continue. And I think we'll be having a glass of fizz at the end of this year, let's put it that way.
I'll have to dial in for that fizz, just to join the celebration. Well, thanks so much for joining us. It really has been an incredibly interesting, hour. I can't believe an hour's gone by. Thank you so much for everything that you've shared with us. So looking forward to seeing what you achieve together with EPAA. I know that the industry, the really serious people out there are ready for this. They are. There is a group of people, a niche, who are hungry for this. So I wish you every success.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining this episode of the Assistant Lab. If you enjoyed this content, you know what you need to do. Feel free to share it and help us grow our subscriber base.
Join us again next time. And until then, keep experimenting, innovating, and improving your skill sets.